everyone, and welcome to Marie's Scrappy Creations, where we sew the scraps of your life into beautiful creations. We all know what time it is. It's time for the kids to go back to school. Or maybe I need to go back to school. Whoever's going back to school. Wouldn't it be nice to go with a nice fabric covered notebook? Now this is a one subject notebook. I'll show you later on in the video. And it has a zippered compartment to put your pens, pencils, even your phone. A phone would fit in there as well. So this is an adorable little notebook cover, and it includes a ribbon to hold your place. Now I made a few of these to arrive at this measurement, okay? So the first one I made, oh, I just love the colors in this. Now mind you, it doesn't have a notebook in it, but that was my first try. Nice green zipper. Second try, and I love the appliques added in. That's some bonus footage. If you stay tuned, I'm going to show you how to put the appliques on your notebook, as well as how to size, you know, whatever notebook you have to fit these covers. So this one, I put the zipper in the opposite direction. The other ones had started at the bottom. Love, love, love the princess theme. And this is the one we're going to make today. It has one applique. It has the black zipper for the pocket area. And I have been so excited to bring this tutorial to all of you. And I know you've been waiting. My apologies on it being a week late. One thing I want to mention is I didn't put pockets on the flaps of this one. I have a video for these composition notebook covers, and they show you how to do the pocket. So I wasn't going to repeat that today. I will link it down below, and further on in the video, it will be in the information card for you to click and watch the video so you can see how to add pockets. There is some bonus footage that will show you how to applique and how to make this fit for something other than a one subject, like if you have a 3 or a 5 subject notebook. So I'm excited. We're going to go do this, but before we do, I just want one more thing I want to tell you. This is a tutorial, but it is also a method. So therefore, I'm going to take my time and explain how I arrived at the measurements that I did, because this is a learning experience for you. And if I tell you how I got these measurements, you're going to know how to get a measurement for whatever you want to cover. And I'm going to show you how to do the appliques in case you're new to my channel and you haven't used the Heat N Bond Lite, or you need a refresher. So remember, there are those out there who are truly beginners and those with a lot of experience, and I try to cover everyone. So if you don't need all the little bits and pieces, you can skip past that. But let's get going. Let's make a notebook cover. All right, as usual, let's take a look at what you're going to need for today's project. These are the things that I used. You may find that you don't need all of them. I used what's called a soft tape measure. I'm using a one subject notebook. You could use something different, but you need to stay tuned to the bonus footage for discussing 3 and 5 subject notebooks. So I have 2 of them here, and they are both the same size. We'll talk about that in a moment. Just going to show that brands really don't matter. Okay. Oh, as long as they measure the 11 inches this way. Okay. And then you're going to need some sewing feet. These are the ones that I used for today's project. I used my 1/4 inch foot, my universal foot, and my zipper foot. I have a zipper. You need a zipper. This is a number 3. You need one that is 10 inches or longer. And the first question from you guys might be, can I use the zipper by the yard that you cut yourself? You absolutely can. Question number 2 about the zipper would be, can I use a number 5 zipper? Absolutely. Your measurements will change just slightly, but not a lot. Use whatever you want. I am using a point turner. If you have a purple thing, anything like that, you're going to need your thread, of course. You're going to need scissors and a rotary cutter, as well as you need an old pair of scissors because we're cutting through the plastic of the zipper. So you don't want to use your good sewing scissors for that now, do we? Okay, you're going to need an iron, your pins or clips. Let's see what else you might need. A marking utensil of any kind, which I don't have nearby, but I'm sure you can find a pencil or something. And I found it was helpful to use my stiletto. The only other thing that I used was a piece of ribbon. Now, this is one of those optional things, and there are a few options in this notebook cover. This, I think I got this. I think it was wrapped around something I bought from Bath and Body Works. I think it was wrapped around the bag. But if you have a piece of ribbon, lace, rickrack, fold over elastic, bias tape, anything will work for this, okay? So as long as you have one, that I think it has to be approximately 13 inches or longer, and then you can cut it down. All right, so let's move on. Oh, before I forget, now as you know, I have used appliqué on some of mine. If you want to dress yours up with appliqué, I am using a small piece of fussy cut fabric and a piece of Heat N Bond Lite that I will press onto the back of this so that I can cut out where it says Star Wars. So all I did with this was the same thing. I put the Heat N Bond on the back, cut around it, and I stitched it onto this piece before I sewed it together. But again, if you stay tuned to the bonus footage today, you can see how I did that if you're new to this sort of stuff. All right, so let's move on to our fabric cuts next. And I am going to have these in the description box below the video, as well as they will be on a card here momentarily. So before I tell you all these measurements, I will say that you could simply use one fabric for the front and one for the liner, and of course your flaps. You don't have to piece this into two pieces. This is just how I'm doing this. So if you're making it like mine, you're going to have one that is 13 inches by 16 inches. You're going to have one that is 13 inches by 5 inches. Now these are my outer fabrics, okay? These are for the front of the notebook cover. And then you're going to need 2 pieces, and these are for your flaps. I guess I should have left this over here. These are these ones right here. They're your inner flaps, okay? Because what we just did was these pieces. Okay, so for your flaps, you need 2 of them cut at 13 inches by 9. And here's another option. You don't have to cut it to 9 inches. Okay, now what we do is we fold them in half, and then by the time those get in the seam, they end up right around 4 inches. So if you wanted it to come out a little bit wider, you can certainly cut them wider than 9 inches. Just remember what you used in case you want to duplicate it the next time you make one. Okay, and you're also going to need a piece for the lining that is 20.5 inches by 12.5 inches. And you're also going to need for your pocket. Now that's the one that you don't see, but it's in here, okay? So these don't have to match. They can be anything you want them to be, but you need 2 pieces of fabric that are 13 inches by 5.5. And I do have 2 here. They're just, there they go, stuck together. And last, we can't forget the zipper tabs. I do mine probably a little bit differently than most people, but it's just what works for me. So if you have a way you do zipper tabs, you can do them whatever way you want. But how I do them is I cut them just over 1 inch wide. And here again, it's going to depend on what size zipper you use. I'm using a number 3 packaged zipper, and they roughly measure 1 inch. But once you get sewing them, I find that I need a little bit more. So I cut my zipper tabs at 1 1/8 by 3 inches. And we're not going to need the whole length, but that's what we're going to start out with. So in case you want to take a screenshot, I am going to have all these measurements on the screen in just a few moments. The only thing we have left is our interfacing and fusibles. All right, so this is Pellon 987. Okay, you could use Pellon 973. You can use cotton batting. In fact, on 2 of mine, I used cotton batting. Just use what you have on hand. I don't want you to have to go out and buy anything. It's not that important that you use exactly what I'm using, is what I'm trying to say. So from the 987, I cut one that is, oh, I had my measurements here. Now, where did I put them? Okay, this is 12.5 inches by 15.5 inches. And then I have a piece that is 12.5 inches. See, 12.5, 12.5. And this is 5 inches wide. Now, this is the equivalent of SF 101. I buy it from Wallwack. I will leave a link below. It ends up being a lot cheaper than the brand name stuff, but hey, they both work great. And again, if you have something different for a lightweight interfacing, just use that. Don't go out and buy something special. So for this, and we're just going to call it SF 101, okay, I have one piece that is 20 inches by 12 inches, and I have 2 pieces that are 4 1/4 by 12 1/2. So let me give you these measurements, and you can screenshot them, you can write them down, you can do whatever you please, but like I said, it will be listed in the description box below the video. Okay, let's move on to part 1. Are you as excited as I am? I think these are so cool. All right, so before we start anything else, I want to show you roughly how I came up with the measurements that I did for this notebook. And again, if you stay tuned for the bonus footage, we are going to look at measurements for a 3 subject, but it would work for a 5 subject or what have you. Okay, so for this particular notebook, I took the measurements. It was 11 inches top to bottom. So I wrote down 11 inches. Then I took my soft tape measure and I put the edge right against the edge of the notebook and held onto it. You want to hold that good and firm. Wrap it right around to the other side where it measures 19 inches exactly. Okay? Well, there we go, 19 inches. So I'm going to take that number and write that down. And I apologize about my hand scratching, and I hope I can describe this well enough for you that you understand what my thought process is. So we're looking at a notebook cover that is shaped like a rectangle. Okay, zoom out just a little bit here. Okay, so we know that it's 11 inches by 19 inches. Now, when I put the fabrics together and sew around, I'm going to need a 1/4 inch on all 4 sides. So that adds, we're going to put plus 1/2 inch, because we're going to need a 1/2 inch between the 2 sides. 1/4 and 1/4 is a 1/2. 1/4 and 1/4 is a half on that. So now we're at 19.5 by 11.5. You following me so far? All right. Then we're going to turn it right side out. And when we do, we're going to lose more fabric. So guess what? I am going to give it another 1/4 inch all the way around. So we're going to add 1/4 inch to that. So right now we're at 19.75 by 11.75. Well, once we get it flipped out, we need to top stitch. You see that? We need a 1/4 inch for top stitching. So we need to add the 1/4 inch on all the way around. So we're going to add another 1/4 inch and 1/4 inch on all 4 sides. So now we would be at 20 by 12, okay? But when we flip things right side out and we move around and our stitches might not be exactly straight in some areas because we're going over a zipper, I'm going to add another 1/4 inch all the way around. And that, my friends, is how I ended up with a finished measurement of 20.5 by 12.5. And that is, of course, before I sew anything together. Okay, so that's how I arrived at the lining piece. That's the measurement for the lining piece before we've sewn anything. And we know that the lining piece is this, whoops, I guess I should zoom back out. It is the size of this plus our seam allowances and our fold overs. So I hope that made sense. If it doesn't, I am going to make a video about how to cover any size book, whether it's a notebook or a hardcover novel you're reading, anything at all. Okay, let's get busy on our notebook cover. Okay, here we go. We're going to prep our pieces. Now, these are the 2 inner flaps that we're working with right here. So we're going to fold those in half. Let's work with one at a time. So I'll fold them right in half with the wrong sides touching each other, right side out. Give them a good press. I apologize for the outside sounds. My window is open today. I would be sweltering in here if it were not. Okay, we're going to do the same thing with the second one. That was a free string. It was included in the price. Okay, again, just pressing it in half. Right, now we have our pieces of SF101 or whichever ones you are using, and these are the ones that are 4 1/4 by 12.5. Now our 13 inch is long. We're going to be trimming this up at the end before we start sewing our notebook together. All right, so you want to put the straight edge right against the fold that you just made in your fabric. And we're going to press that. Whatever interfacing you're using, just use the manufacturer's instructions. It doesn't matter which side you have the bumpy side against. It's going to adhere to one side or the other, which is all that's important for this project. Also, I wanted to mention that along this edge, the folded edge, we can use, if you have decorative stitches on your machine, you might want to put a row of something that's decorative, because I know, you know, those machines that come with all these stitches and we think, oh, that's great, and then we hardly ever use them. I mean, they're great, but you have to find a use for them sometimes. So this would be one of those times. And I did choose a pretty dark fabric here, so I'd have to use gray or white fabric in order for it to show up. So again, just make sure your straight edge is along the fold of your fabric. And for this, I am using steam. I have my iron on the cotton setting. And as you can see, I'm just moving this along. This stuff adheres pretty quickly and easily to whatever I go to use it for. Okay, I'm going to pin these together so they don't get lost. Those are my flap pieces. All right, so the next one that I will do, these are our two front pieces. This piece and this piece. And we are going to add some of the Pellon 987 to them. And I do have directional fabric on both of these, so there are places where I need to make sure that I'm using it correctly. All right, so we're just going to place that where we want it. And again, we're going to press it according to instructions. I find that most of these work much better when you're using steam. Not all of the fusibles do, but many of them adhere much quicker with a little bit of help. And if you don't use steam, you can always just use your handy dandy spray bottle. All right, here we go with this one. And if there's any obvious wrinkles, of course, just give them a quick press. And you're just kind of centering this. We're going to be trimming a lot of this. Well, not a lot off it, but we're going to be trimming our pieces towards the end. And the next part we're going to do is quilting down through the layers. And you don't need to do it a lot. This stuff will mostly stick where it is placed. If you're using cotton batting or something that isn't fused, you're going to want to quilt it a little bit closer together. And of course, if you remember, I quilted quite a bit on one of my composition notebook covers. So I am going to link that in the description box, because there are parts of this notebook that you could kind of take some notes from the other notebook. See how I did that? Notes. All right, so next we're going to take care of the zipper. And this is just so easy. Right, the first thing you want to do is cut your zipper down to 9 inches and grab those pesky little tabs that they've eluded me. I don't know where I put them. Let me pause you. Aha, they were off to the right. Okay, now the first couple of notebook covers I made, I doubled them, and I kind of, well, after cutting this off, I would fold them over, I'd stitch and flip both edges back. There was nothing wrong with that, but it was unneeded bulk. It just wasn't necessary. So what I've been doing is this. First thing is, I'll get this out of the way. We're going to cut this metal end right off of there. We don't need that in our way. Just be careful not to cut it with your scissors or your rotary cutter. Now this is my old rotary cutter that's used just for things like this. Now move your zipper pull down, and you're going to measure it to 9 inches. Or roughly, you know, really you could have it a little bit longer than that, or whatever you want. I am going to put a pin in mine at 9 inches. I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to hold it in place, and I'm going to stitch back and forth 3 or 4 times right there to hold that together, and I'll be right back. Okay, now I have stitched, and I apologize, but I already have my black thread in, but you can see that I stitched right there. It just holds it together. Now I'm going to trim my zipper. Just don't cut through the thread that you just sewed together. Have I ever done that before? I have, and that's why I mention it. Okay. Take your zipper tabs, and like I said, these are longer than what we need. Face down. Put the right side of your fabric against the right side of your zipper tape, I guess is what you call this part. And we're going to pin it. I'm going to do the same thing on the other end. Right sides together, straight edge to straight edge. And then we're going to go over to the sewing machine and I'm going to use a 1/4 inch stitch or seam allowance. And I'll probably use a 2 or 2.5 millimeter stitch length, and I am going to sew. I'm going to hold it like this, and I'm going to sew across. I'm going to back tack at the beginning and the end because I want these to kind of stay in place. Okay, that is done. And we're going to press that back. Just don't melt your zipper. These are plastic. Okay. And in other circumstances, I might top stitch that, but I didn't feel it was necessary for these. I didn't do it on this one. It's totally up to you. If you would like to top stitch, you top stitch. Personally, I am going to leave that part undone. All right, so let's take our larger piece. Okay, I'm going to turn it sideways for this demonstration. And I'm going to find the center by folding it in half, creasing it, and if you want to, you could mark that, or you could go like this and pin it so you've got a visual. I'm going to put a pin there because I realize that it's probably not picking it up very well. The next thing you need to decide on is which way you want your zipper to go. Now on this one, it starts at the bottom and goes up. There's nothing wrong with that, but on my latest one, I decided after making 3 the other way that I was going to put the zipper in at the top, and you know what, I think it's easier to open, or at least it is for me. So I'm going to orient the opening of my zipper at the top. Okay, so it's going to be going this way. This is, see, this is closed. I'm sorry, everything's black. I should have chosen something a little brighter for this, but either way. So you're going to line up your zipper tab ends right there. Find the center of your zipper, make a crease. I'm going to make a crease on both sides, and I'm just lining up that fabric that I sewed on. Okay, now that I have the center all marked, I'm going to put it right with the center mark there. And I guess I should have pinned that. Right there, just for marking purposes. Okay. So I have the zipper oriented the way I want it. I'm going to match my pins. One can come out. Right, so that is right side down against the right side of the fabric. So you've got right side up, zipper, right side down. And it doesn't matter if your zipper is open or closed, but I am, actually it does to me. So now that I have it middle way, I'm going to move the zipper down. Then it's not going to get in my way while I'm sewing. or at least not until the end of the seam. And I always pin twice on these. I pin once now to place the zipper evenly against the edge of the fabric all the way along. And you'll notice we have some extra on the edge, just like I said we would. We're going to be doing a lot of trimming here. I'm going to even this up. And you can use clips. If you are a person who likes Wonder Clips, you can certainly use Wonder Clips for this. Won't hurt a bit. Okay. Now we're going to take our pocket pieces, okay? So these are your pieces that are what, 5.5 by 13, something like that. Okay, you're going to put your fabric right down right here, and it's going to be right side down. So if this were a printed fabric, it's going to go right side down against that edge. Line up both left and right side and pin right in place, right? Just keep all your fabrics even on the edge. When we go over to the sewing machine, we're going to use a zipper foot and we're going to stitch the length. And before I leave the sewing machine from stitching the length, I'm going to top stitch. But I'm going to take you over there with me so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. And I think just because I have my window open today, it seems to be extra noisy. I mean, it's a Saturday. I guess it just is what it is, right? Oop. I wasn't lined up. I didn't see. The black is throwing me off here. Okay, so let's go over to the sewing machine. Okay, I want to let you see what my sewing machine is on. I'm using a 2.5 millimeter stitch length, and I have my needle over to the right to 4.7, and I'll show you. I have my zipper foot on. I'll show you that in just a second. So I have my needle over close to this edge right here, to the middle. Normally it would be closer to this left edge, but I have it set closer over there. Okay, we are going to start sewing. You're just going to keep the side of your zipper foot against the edge of your fabric, removing the pins as you go. This is where I sometimes find it very handy to use the stiletto, but because I have a tripod with a camera right in the middle of my line of vision, I'm not using that at the moment. But I am getting close to where my zipper is, so I'm going to take a few more stitches. I'm going to stop, take my pin out. This is already lifted up, this presser. I'm going to grab onto that, and then usually your machine will let you lift it up a little bit more. And you can work, yeah, I say that. If I could grab onto it, there we go, and move your zipper up to the top. Straighten everything back out, and continue. Now I'm going to leave my zipper foot right on there for top stitching, but I'm going to change the stitch length to a 3. You can use a 3.5 millimeter if you want. So you're going to straighten this out, and you could take it to the iron. I usually do, but because of a time crunch, I'm not going to. But what I am going to do is make sure that it's folded back in place. I'm going to pin it just so that it doesn't move. You just want to be sure that everything is where you want it to be before you start top stitching, because otherwise you will be using your seam ripper. Okay. I'm actually going to move this to the other side. Well, goodness, I can't seem to grab that thread. Okay. So I have my needle over to a 5.3, and I'm lining up the edge of my foot with that. And again, I'm using a 3 millimeter stitch length. You can use whatever you'd like for yours. Whatever makes you happy. Because it should be a happy day when you're sewing, right? Yeah, let's go back over the sewing table. See how the next part goes. Okay, so we just finished our top stitching. And this is the way the notebook cover is oriented, exactly how it would be. I'm not sure why I have a little bit of a ripple, but I think that will press out. I'm not going to worry about it. We're going to take this next piece. All right. So with your zipper up, and make sure if you have directional fabric that it's going in the, yeah, I went to say proper or incorrect at the same time. In a crocker, yeah, in the proper direction. So line up your edges first, or at least that's the way I do it. I go on the left and the right, or the right and the left. You could do it that way too. You rebel. And again, I'm going to move my zipper down to the end because that's just how I like to do things. I'm going to hold this in there. Okay, now we're going to take our other pocket piece. Don't know where I hid that. Thankfully not far, right? Okay, so lay your pocket piece down. Okay, so as you see, this is all oriented this way. We're going to lay this, if this was a printed fabric, you're going to have the printed side up. So right side up, okay? This is what the back looks like because this is the inside of your pocket. You're going to place it down there. And I'm going to flip it over while I get everything straight. So I'm not trying to confuse you, but I have to get everything straight. So see, the right sides of your pocket fabric are touching each other. And don't worry about the difference in the width. You'll notice there's a little bit different. Don't you worry, we're going to fix everything. If I say it's okay, then I promise you it's okay. All right, I guess I should make sure that's a little more even than what it is. So I'm going to pin along the top, keeping everything level. All the pocket, the zipper piece, and this top piece. Everything lined up. And I'm not going to take you to the sewing machine with me this time. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to put our zipper foot, we're going to go right down the edge just like I did before, and then we're going to top stitch. It's the exact same thing. So as soon as I pin this, I'm going to do that. And after that, I'll meet you back here for the next part. Off I am to sew. Off to sew I am. Okay, I didn't top stitch this yet because I forgot to tell you guys something. After you have sewn this second piece, okay, once you've sewn it, on the back you want to make sure you open it up like this. Okay, so you don't want to top stitch it with this down here. That would defeat your pocket, the purpose of your pocket. It would be closed before you began. So straightening it out like this, and then again in the front, and just like I did last time, I'm going to hold this to this side. It's not going to stay here, but that's where we need it, so that we can top stitch nice and neat across here. So I had forgotten to tell you that. I just wanted to pop on there really quick before I top stitch and tell you that. Okay, so I have everything top stitched. Now, I could have had you quilt these pieces before you put them together, and you certainly could do that, but because I'm not quilting this a lot, it really doesn't need it very close together. I guess I kind of forgot to say that, but after I made my first one, I found easier ways to do everything, and for me this is what works. So you're just going to mark your quilting lines. I'm going to mark them on the opposite side. I have a much smaller ruler somewhere here. All right. I just want one line of stitching on this. And I tend to mark my quilting lines on the back of projects whenever I can. And I think I'll mark the first one at about 2.5 inches in. You can quilt it however you want. Then after that, going to go 3 inches. All I'm going to do is use a serpentine stitch down each of these lines. It's a notebook cover. It's not a quilt. It's not anything that's going to be used so much that you can't, that it would fall apart on you. So I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine, and you could use a straight stitch. You can quilt it however you want, but I'm going to use one of those serpentine stitches, and I'm going to stitch that and the one line down here. I am also going to place my appliqué on here. I will film that for the extra footage, but you don't need to see that now. You probably know how they go on if you've been watching my channel for a while, but if you're a beginner, you're going to want to stay tuned. I'm going to quilt that. I'll be back. Okay, so this is what we have, and it's larger than what we need. Mine is measuring approximately 13 inches by 21.5. So not so big side to side as it is the other way. But we're going to trim this down. we can trim it down now, or we can trim it later, but I am going to do it now. So I am going to trim this down to measure 20.5 by 12.5. Okay, and how I'm going to do that is I'm going to put one of the lines of my ruler, one of my acrylic rulers, I'm going to put the line against the zipper and the bottom. I'm going to find the best way to even that up. So I start with one fresh edge over here. So let's see what line that would be. It looks like about 1/8 of an inch line I've got it on. I'm doing any amount of cutting. I have some safety gloves that I use. They are great. Oh, before I forget to mention, if you want to make this narrower, like let's say after you make one and you know how this whole process goes, you could make this narrower, make your pocket larger. You know, as long as your pocket doesn't extend past halfway, you're good to go. But anyway, just want to throw that in there. All right, so now that I have this straight edge, I'm going to even up the top. Make sure it's even in more than one way. So what we have left now is our lining, and we have our inner flaps. So again, these are these pieces here that the notebook cover goes into. So we have the SF-101 inside here. I promise we do, right there. So what I'm going to do, just pin or clip these in a couple of places. Now, if you have a decorative stitch you would like to use, I would say go for it. I'm not going to use a decorative stitch, and I'm just going to use some black thread to stitch a line down. Now, you could put pockets on here. When we made the composition notebook covers like this, we put pockets on those, so I will direct you to a video. It will be up above in the cards. It will also be in the description box below. So if you would like to add pockets to these flaps, you could do that. Okay, so I'm going to go over and I'm going to stitch about 1/8 to 1/4 inch away from both of my folded seams. You want to, or folded edge, you want to leave this open. I am going to use a decorative stitch or a serpentine stitch down roughly around the center of this. Okay, so that's what I'm going to go do. We'll trim these to size and we're almost done. Alrighty, now I stitched 1/4 inch from the edge and I did a serpentine stitch down the center. We have to deal with our ribbon. So on the ribbon on this one, you can see where it is, okay? And when you put the spiral of the notebook here, it kind of sits fairly close because I went over 3/4 of an inch from the center. So we're going to go over further. But the other thing I wanted to show you while I was right here was how I dealt with the bottom of this ribbon, which was I folded it and I folded it again and I stitched across, okay? And I made sure that it comes down below here. So this is how I figured the length. I looked at what the finished measurement was of this, which is 11.5 inches. I knew I wanted at least 3/4 of an inch over the edge. I left a 1/2 inch at the top. So if you do that, you're going to find out that it takes, well, I guess about 15. I was thinking 13, but let's cut our ribbon. Not that 13 wouldn't work, but all right. If you have a lighter, this is what I do. I'm not going to set my place on fire, but I melted it. So all it does is keep it from fraying. I've already done it on this end when I just kind of melts it a little bit. Okay, so let's get this put together. We're going to deal with the ribbon first. Fold it in half, right sides together. Oh goodness, we didn't do the pocket. You guys are probably hollering, Marie, the pocket. Okay, let's stop and do this. Both pieces of the pocket should be pointing this way. See, there's two pieces here. They're pointing this way. The first thing you would notice, if this wasn't black on black, is that there's a difference. Okay, now I think I might have mentioned this earlier on in the video, but if I didn't, this is more of a method than it is a pattern, because in the bonus footage I'm going to show you how to make this work for a thicker notebook. So one set of measurements is not going to fit all notebooks. Okay, so while this is pointed this way, because that's how it's going to be opened, okay, the pencil case or whatever you want to call it that's in there goes this way. So while you have both pieces that way, pin it. Okay, just hold it right where it is. Okay. Just make sure that both edges are straight. Okay, now take your scissors or your rotary cutter, but nobody's going to see this. It really doesn't need to be perfect. Nobody's going to really peek inside there. Using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, we're going to stitch. Okay, I sewed it with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So lay your notebook cover as it is, like this, as it should be, with this pointed this way. Now I want you to pin this in place, making sure it's smooth. You don't want any bumps. Then we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to baste this. And if you've never basted anything, that just means to use a long stitch length. We're going to go really close to this edge. We're just going to hold this in place. So we're going to stitch here and here with a long stitch. Okay? Then meet me right back here. Right, that's done. So I know you can't see, but I just stitched along the pocket, just holding it to the notebook cover. Now we will take care of our ribbon. So again, we're going to fold this in half. So at the top, you're going to pin just to mark it in the center. Okay. And you have two choices. You can go to the right or to the left of center. I prefer the right because when the notebook is in here, you make your place, your mark for your place right there. So I guess it depends on how you want yours to look. So for example, and I always put the cardboard, the non-bendy side in or end in first, and then the flexible one second. Okay, so oops, when you're using your Sort of, see like this? See how that sets for the bookmark? All right. So it will depend on whether you want it on the left or the right, but I'm going to put it on the right. You can make up your own mind about how you want yours to be. Okay, I apologize. I stopped filming. So we have this marked in the center, and we want our ribbon to the right of center, but because we're working backwards, you're going to measure over to the left of where we are now, because then it will end up over here, which will be correct. Trust me. So we're going to place this 1 inch over. Now that doesn't mean to center your ribbon at 1 inch. That means put your 1 inch mark on your pin and then place your ribbon or whatever you're using at the 1 inch mark. And also, I leave a little bit overlapped. Okay, that's about, well, probably 3/4 of an inch, which is more than I need. Yeah, but I want it to get caught up in the seam when I sew it. So I'm going to baste this in place so that it will stay there, and I'll be right back. All right, and we're back, and that is just basted in place. I'm going to use a safety pin. You don't need a great big one. But I don't want this to be in the way. So I'm going to move it out of our way. I don't want it to get caught up in our stitching. All right. So we have this right side up. We're going to take our flaps. Now make sure that the open side is towards the edge, okay? I'm going to pin this in a few places. Take our other one, and again, make sure that your open side is towards the edge. And you may not find that this next step is necessary for you, but for me, I feel it turns out better when I don't skip this stitch, or the step, which is I baste stitch this in place, which again is just a very long stitch length holding something in place. Okay, you could go ahead and put your lining in there, but I'm going to do this. So I'll baste stitch this and meet you right back here. Okay, I have that basted on there, both of them. So we're going to take our lining piece and put them right sides together. You're going to pin around, and you're going to leave an opening on this side. So let me get this corner pinned and I'll show you what I mean. I think I ended up cutting this lining a little bit different for some reason. All right, just past this pocket, to the side of this pocket, I'm going to put this pin in the opposite direction. And I'm going to leave about 4 inches of an opening, and I'm going to pin it again. So now pin or clip everything else together. And if it is a little bit different, like mine is, see here, I'm just going to use this piece as my guide because I know that I had that cut to what I wanted it to be for a measurement. probably overpin, but you know. Right, so we're going to go over to the sewing machine. We're going to start at one of these pins that we left the opening. You're going to back tack, you're going to sew all the way around, and you're going to back tack here. You're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I am going to use a 2.5 millimeter stitch length, and I'll meet you right back here as usual. Okay, and I have to trim the top especially because my lining piece was a little bit larger. I must have cut it that way, but okay, so I'm going to ignore the opening at the moment. I'm going to start right to the side of it. And what you need to do, just kind of roll the fabric to try to flatten it, okay? And I'm going to use some steam with this. So we're going to fold this in. I'll try to do it so you guys can see. Folding it in, that 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to finger press it. I'm only working with one side at a time. Then I'll fold this one in, making sure it's even. So I'll fold it where I think. Then line it up. Attention, line up. I know, it's just my attempt at humor. If you have to go back over it, you can. There's no rule against that. So I want to make sure that I press it from this side as well. Turn my steam back on some. Okay, so I'm not going to show it on here, but I am going to hand stitch this closed with a ladder stitch, all right? You could sew it across close to your edge. Well, you know what? That's not going to show if I do that because I've got a lot of one color there, which happens to be black. So I can stitch about a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch away from the edge using my zipper foot. But what I did on my other one is I closed it with a ladder stitch before top stitching around. So we are at that point. So we are going to start. I'm going to stitch that closed. I'll take you with me. I'm going to stitch that closed very close to the edge. And I'm going to cut my thread. Then I'm going to go around with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and you want your ribbon up here. You don't want it down here because it will get caught up and it won't lay down in the notebook correctly. So leave your ribbon up. The other thing that I want to tell you is that if I were you, I would stitch from this inside, and I'm going to show you why. Exactly why I'm pinning as well. It's very easy when you have it in this direction and you're sewing along. It's very easy for these to get folded. Even if you pin them, those flaps can fold a little bit, okay? But if you have it in this direction, you're not going to catch anything. So we're going to go over and we're going to close this up because that's it, and we're done with this adorable little notebook cover. Well, I think it looks fine. I think because there's so much black there, no one would really notice. All right, going to grab my thread. Sew around using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to switch it to a 3 millimeter stitch length. Okay, we're done top stitching. And again, I'm happy with that edge. So depending on the fabric that you have, the print that you have, you know, you could possibly get away with not hand stitching it either. Boy, that black holds on to every bit of dust, doesn't it? Now see, that lays just where I want it to now. It's coming along that edge right there. I can still cut this off and, you know, melt it with, which I think I will, melt it with the lighter. I just don't want to catch my paper on fire. But I think that that is a nice thing to have. To keep your place. Now I cut that at an angle. Give it a good melt. There we go. And we're done. Look at that. A nice fit. Very nice. I really like how this turned out. And I mean, I've made a few of them now. We've got one made for a royal princess. And we've got this one, and I even have the first one that I made, which was a thinner, but I really like this one. It's very colorful. So I hope that you give these a try. They are a bit different than the composition notebook covers, and there's nothing wrong with composition notebooks in theory, but for me, the papers don't stay in there very well, and I prefer a spiral bound notebook. So these covers for me are better, and that's just personal preference. And as I said earlier, you can put pockets on them. You could put a tag on there if you have your own tag. You could do that. You could put appliques on here. You could do any number of things with these. But I think that I'm very pleased with how it turned out. And I want to thank you for hanging out with me today. If you're interested, stay tuned for the bonus footage. We're going to go over the how to do the applique. We're also going to go over how to make this a different size if your notebook is a 3-subject or 5-subject notebook, as well as if you want to switch up the width of this and make it any bit differently, so that maybe this is narrower and you've got a larger pocket for your pens and pencils to go into. But I think these are great. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I had a lot of fun, and I hope you did too. I hope you make some of these for your favorite student, or maybe for yourself, for just all your sewing notes, because we have to keep track of things, right? That's what it's all about. Okay, thanks so much. And remember, be kind out there. The world needs more of that. I'll see you next time, right here at Marie's Scrappy Creations. Bye-bye. I want a little applique on the front of that. So I'm going to turn my steam off. This is the part that I want. So I'm going to make sure that I have this where I want it. Has to extend past the edge for me. I'll be cutting this out. It only takes a little bit of heat and it's done. Okay, so I have pinned my pocket to one side because I'm going to applique something on the front. Now, I cut this to size, and I'm sorry, I just peeled the paper off without thinking, but this has the Heat N Bond Lite on the back of it, so it's now shiny. You might not be able to see that. Okay, so it depends on how you want this. I mean, your appliques might be similar to this one, where it doesn't matter where they go. Remember your seam allowances. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find out where my center is. Right along there. Close enough, right? And I want to place this. So at the beginning, I put the rough side of the Heat N Bond Lite to the back of the fabric, and then I put the iron on it for heat. Then when you're ready, you pull the paper off. It's not sticky, but you can see a shininess, and the heat of the iron will place that. So I have that middle way. I'm going to place this down where I want it. I'm going to take my iron. Just hold it like that. Now, since this is Heat N Bond Lite, and the link will be below, I have to stitch through this. So I left 1/8 of an inch around my whole design so that I can stitch down with a straight stitch. But because it's for a child, if that were for an adult, I would probably leave it. But because this is going to a child, I'm going to use a very narrow zigzag stitch on this. So let's go do that really quickly. So for my zigzag stitch, I chose just a regular zigzag, and as you can see, the length is set to 0.8 and the width is 3.0. So your machine may be different than mine, but for anyone who has like a singer or a brother, it might be quite similar. So I wanted to show you. I'm going to use that stitch length to go around the applique on my notebook cover. So let's do that. So again, just be sure that your pocket piece is not in the way of this. It's just simply the back. All right. So I always pull up my bobbin thread. Get this pinned and out of my way. And I always like to start on the bottom. I'll put one stitch down, being very careful of where it falls. Pull that up with my bobbin thread. Pull that along, tuck it behind me, and now I'm going to start stitching. I apologize for this. I could not have the camera directly in front of me because I can't see. I'm going to go back to, and I'm going to go forward. Okay, now I'm back to where I started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to a straight stitch, but I'm going to go down to a 1.6, 1.8 millimeter. I'm going to go forward a couple, going to go backwards a couple, just to make sure that all my zigzag stitches stay in place. And that's what it looks like. So, if you've never used Heat N Bond Lite before, this is how it's done. So, we're going to pretend, or we're going to go with, this is going to be a shape that I'm going to applique to this piece. And this is what I'm using, Heat N Bond Lite. This is in a lavender purple colored package. You do not want the Ultra Hold, which is in a red package, because you're not supposed to sew through that. I'm using a pair of old scissors. Now, there are two sides to this. There's a smooth, papery side, and there is a rough, I think you can see the designs on it, okay? So, you put the rough side against the wrong side of your fabric. You don't need steam on your iron. You just press it for a couple of seconds, just like that, and you're going to let it cool. And as soon as it's cooled, let's cut out a shape. All right, so we have a heart. Kind of, sort of. And what we're going to do, oops, I missed part of that. We're going to peel that off the back. We have a flat. I didn't have enough of the Heat N Bond to go through the whole thing. Okay, that's all right. Any shape wouldn't matter. Same thing. So you place it wherever you want it on your fabric. And there you go. Then all I do is I stitch. Now, a lot of times I straight stitch, or just barely inside this light green colored piece. Or sometimes I do what I did today, which was a narrow zigzag. But either way, as you can see, it's kind of on there. It doesn't peel off. The second part of the bonus footage, we're going to talk about how do I make the same notebook cover, but for a bigger notebook. So today we used a one subject notebook, all right? So it only has the thickness of a one subject, but I also have a 3 subject notebook here. So let's take a look at how that's different. I'll move my iron so I don't scorch myself. And we're going to take our soft measuring tape. All right, so let's, just like I measured for the other one, we're going to measure for this one, and the same rules are going to apply. You're going to put your soft measuring tape against the edge, and you're going to hold it there and go around your notebook. Make sure that this is held right to there. You would get a different measurement if you just opened the notebook flat. Okay, get that just right. I can't seem to get my hand around this. I'm going to have to flip it and do it this way. So it's 20 inches. The last one was 19 inches. So everything that we just did is different by an inch this way. The measurements would be the same this way. And the same rules apply. You need a 1/4 inch on all 4 sides to sew your seam. Then you need a 1/4 inch on this side and a 1/4 inch on this side. So a 1/4 inch for the top and a 1/4 inch for the side for what I think of as easement. And then for top stitching, you need a 1/4 inch, a 1/4 inch, a 1/4 inch, and a 1/4 inch. So the same rules apply as what we did earlier. So that was easy, that it's only 1 inch different in size. That's pretty cool. Now, I know that the 5 subjects would be thicker yet again, although I don't have one here, so I really don't know how much. But you know who would know? You would, because you're going to give it a try. Because I know some of you have 5 subject notebooks, or you have kids or grandkids, nieces or nephews who use 5 subject notebooks. Maybe you do. And you're going to measure it, and then you're going to know. And maybe the brands are different as well. They might be different thicknesses depending on the brand. Now for the next part of our bonus footage, it would be how to change your width, okay? I've had narrower ones, and your pocket will depend on what you put here because you've only got this much space. So you need to remember that when you're making these notebooks. So this is the thought on it. Let's say that you cut this at 3 inches instead of what we did with 5 inches wide, okay? Let's say you cut it at 3 inches. You need to make up the difference because you need this whole thing from side to side when it's finished to measure 20.5 inches, okay? So you just need to figure out your math. If you make this 3 inches instead of 5 inches, then this piece would have to be 19 inches instead of 16. You see where I'm going? So also, if you do that, then your zipper would be over here. So then you're going to have a wider pocket area if you choose. You don't have to make the pocket any wider, but you could. So then you'll have to figure out your pocket and what the width would be. But it's all math, and that's basically what I'm telling you. You just change your cuts, because see here that on this one, outer piece number 1 is this. So that's 13 inches by 16. And this one was 13 by 5. So if we change that to 3 inches, we've got to add the other 2 inches over here. Okay? And it's just as easy as that. So you could change them up. And there's so many variations you could do with these. You could take quilt blocks that you have left over, add fabric to them. You could crumb piece all together. You could take pieces left over from jelly rolls and just quilt as you go onto a piece of batting or fusible fleece to make yours. The possibilities are endless. So as I always like to say, make it your own. Just because I did it this way doesn't mean you have to. This is just the basic notebook cover. So you can personalize it however you want. Now this one of our granddaughters chose this fabric. She loves princesses, and as you can see, we've got Rapunzel letting down her golden hair, and the prince is going to get her there. He's climbing up. Oh, he's got her. He saved the princess. And she chose Elsa and Anna for the side, and the tiaras, which I guess I cut sideways, but it was too late. The fabric was cut. There wasn't any more, so that's what she got. And she has a pretty pink ribbon for her notebook. Either way, these are fun. They're just so much fun. And I'm so glad that you stuck around with me today. Oh, there's a good example. Remember how I put on the tutorial today, we put it on the right? This is one that I tried on the left. It still works. I just prefer it on the right side. So thank you for sticking around for the bonus footage. I know it's not a lot, but it's just a sneak peek into how my brain here at Marie's Scrappy Creations works to create some of these things that we sew. I always have to try out multiple times, trying to get them just right and the measurements everywhere I need it to be. So thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. And as I said earlier, be kind out there. The world needs more of that. You take care. I'll see you next time.